Picture a bustling city, alive with millions, where some call the pavement their only home. But in the 1980s, darkness brought terror. A faceless killer turned the sidewalks of Bombay and Calcutta into his hunting ground. The victims, pavement dwellers, murdered in their sleep, their heads crushed by heavy stones. No witnesses, no clues, just a chilling pattern that baffled police and terrified the public. The press named him the Stoneman, a shadow who vanished as mysteriously as he appeared. Today, we unravel the mystery of India's most elusive serial killer and the flawed investigation that let him slip away. The Stoneman's reign began in Bombay, 1985. His victims, homeless, invisible to the city, were killed with a single crushing blow from a heavy stone. The murders went unnoticed at first, dismissed as accidents or street violence. But as bodies piled up, the pattern became undeniable. Always pavement dwellers, always killed in their sleep, always the same brutal method. With no witnesses, no forensic evidence, and generic stones as weapons, police were left chasing a ghost. The killings stopped in Bombay by 1987, but in 1989, the nightmare resurfaced in Calcutta. Same method, same victims. Was it a copycat, or had the Stoneman moved cities? The terror had only just begun. Calcutta's streets became the new hunting ground. 13 more lives lost, the same silent, brutal signature. The homeless lived in fear, sleeping in groups or not at all. Police rounded up suspects, but with no evidence, the killer remained a phantom. Was it one man moving between cities, or two killers inspired by the same gruesome idea? The case remains unsolved, the files cold. The Stoneman, a ghostly legend in India's criminal history. The mystery endures, a killer who vanished without a trace. The 1980s in India were a time of upheaval. Cities like Bombay and Calcutta swelled with migrants, their streets divided by wealth and poverty. Homelessness soared, and the cities forgotten became easy prey. With no CCTV, limited forensics, and overburdened police, the night belonged to shadows. The Stoneman exploited these blind spots, targeting those society ignored. For the pavement dwellers, anonymity was both a shield and a curse. Their deaths were easily dismissed, their lives barely registered. In this urban wilderness, the Stoneman thrived. Bombay in the 1980s was a city of contrasts, glamour and ambition shadowed by poverty and desperation. Migrants arrived with hope, but many ended up living on the streets, building makeshift shelters in the city's margins. Pavement dwellers were vulnerable, exposed to crime and neglect, invisible to the city's systems. Their deaths rarely made headlines, often dismissed as accidents or street violence. This neglect gave the Stoneman his opportunity. He killed with impunity, knowing his victims would go unnoticed. The police were slow to see the pattern, focused elsewhere. In the shadows, the Stoneman perfected his craft, leaving a city haunted by fear. In the 1980s, Calcutta was India's cultural heart, but also a city scarred by political turmoil and economic decline. Its vibrant intellectual life contrasted with profound urban decay and widespread homelessness. Pavements became home for thousands, vulnerable to the city's harsh realities. In 1989, a killer known as the Stoneman struck, preying on the city's most invisible. For Calcutta's homeless, the night was no longer safe. The Stoneman's reign of terror thrived because his victims were invisible. Pavement dwellers, laborers, rag pickers, the mentally unwell. Their deaths went unnoticed in the chaos of Bombay and Calcutta. No family, no advocates, no headlines, just anonymity in life and death. Their erasure is the darkest part of this story, murdered in plain sight yet unseen. In 1985, Bombay's Sion district awoke to horror. A homeless man, brutally killed, his head crushed by a heavy stone. At first, police saw it as just another tragedy on the streets, but as more bodies appeared, all killed in the same way, a chilling pattern emerged. The stone man was stalking Bombay's most vulnerable, and the city would never be the same. What set the stone man apart from other criminals was his chillingly consistent modus operandi. It was a signature so simple, yet so brutal, that it left no room for doubt when a new victim was found. The killer's method was a three-part ritual of death. First, he selected his target from the vast population of pavement dwellers sleeping in the open. He chose them for their isolation and vulnerability, ensuring there would be no witnesses to his approach. His selection process seemed random yet specific. He targeted those who were alone, away from the relative safety of larger groups, making them easy prey in the dead of night. The second part of the signature was the weapon itself. The killer never brought a weapon with him. He found it at or near the scene of the crime. His choice was always a large, heavy stone or a concrete block, typically weighing over 30 kilograms, so around 66 pounds. This detail was crucial. It suggested a killer who was opportunistic but methodical, someone who knew how to use the urban environment as his arsenal. The stone was not just a weapon, it was a statement. Its immense weight and impersonal nature spoke of a cold, detached rage, a desire to inflict maximum damage with a single, decisive blow. The final and most gruesome element of the signature was the act of murder. The stone man would approach his sleeping victims and, with immense force, either drop or smash the heavy stone directly onto their heads. The attack was designed for instant lethality, crushing the skull and leaving no chance of survival or identification of the attacker. There were never signs of a struggle, no defensive wounds. The victims were killed in their sleep, unaware of the doom that had descended upon them. This silent method of execution added to the killer's ghostly reputation. He came and went like a phantom, leaving only death in his wake. This terrifyingly consistent pattern was the killer's calling card. It was repeated with meticulous precision in every murder attributed to him in Bombay. The choice of victim, the use of a found stone, and the specific method of killing were the three pillars of his gruesome craft. This signature allowed police to link the cases, but it offered them frustratingly few clues. The weapon was untraceable, a random object from the street. The lack of interaction with the victim meant no witnesses. The stoneman's signature was both a clear announcement of his presence and a perfect blueprint for an unsolvable crime. In 1986 and 1987, Bombay was gripped by fear. The stoneman's brutal murders haunted the city's streets, especially for the homeless, who changed their habits just to survive. Police patrols increased, but the faceless killer remained elusive, blending into the night. The city waited, anxious, never knowing when he would strike again. The Stoneman killings in Bombay suddenly stopped, leaving the city in uneasy silence. For nearly 2 years, the terror faded into memory, but in 1989, Calcutta awoke to a chillingly familiar crime. A pavement dweller murdered, head crushed by a stone. The killer's signature was unmistakable. Had the stoneman returned, or simply moved on? Calcutta was now in the grip of fear. In 1980s Calcutta, a chilling pattern emerged. The stoneman's brutal killings of the homeless echoed the terror once felt in Bombay. 13 victims, a city in fear, and a police force desperate for answers. The killer vanished as suddenly as he appeared, leaving behind a haunting mystery that still endures. In 1980s Bombay, police were slow to respond to the murders of pavement dwellers, seeing them as low priority. By the time they realized a serial killer was at work, the stoneman had vanished into the city's shadows. When the killings resurfaced in Calcutta, police acted faster, but the killer's anonymity and cunning left both forces frustrated and empty-handed. The Stoneman murders were a true hunt for a phantom. No witnesses, no evidence. Just a shadow moving through the city's darkest corners. The killer left behind only bodies and blood-stained stones. Nothing to trace, no face to find. The police chased shadows, but the Stoneman always vanished into the night. With no physical evidence to guide them, investigators turned to the burgeoning field of criminal psychology to try and build a profile of the killer. They needed to understand the mind of the man they were hunting. Based on the pattern of the crimes, profilers suggested that the Stoneman was likely a loner, a man who felt alienated from society. He was probably socially inept, incapable of forming normal relationships, and harbored a deep-seated rage. This anger was not directed at specific individuals, but at a class of people he perceived as weak and worthless, a reflection of his own feelings of powerlessness. The choice of victim, homeless pavement dwellers, was seen as highly significant. Profilers theorized that the killer might have been homeless himself, or at least intimately familiar with life on the streets. This would explain how he could navigate these communities at night without attracting attention. His attacks could have been driven by a twisted sense of territoriality or a form of self-loathing, where he projected his own inadequacies onto his victims and sought to eradicate them. The methodical nature of the killings suggested he was not acting in a frenzied, chaotic state, but with a cold, disciplined, and ritualistic precision that was deeply disturbing. The weapon of choice, a heavy stone, also offered psychological insight. Unlike a knife or a gun, a stone is an impersonal and primal weapon. Its use suggested a killer who wanted to maintain a degree of distance from his victims, even as he committed an act of extreme, intimate violence. The act of crushing a head is one of ultimate depersonalization, of turning a human being into an object. This pointed to a profound lack of empathy, a hallmark of a psychopathic personality. The killer did not see his victims as people. He saw them as symbols of a society that had rejected him, and their destruction brought him a sense of power and control. This psychological profile, while compelling, was ultimately an academic exercise. It provided a theoretical sketch of the man they were looking for. A solitary, enraged, and possibly homeless individual who knew the streets like the back of his hand. However, this description fit thousands of men in cities as large as Bombay and Calcutta. It gave the police a type to look for, but it did not give them a name or a face. The profile of the ghost remained just that, a description of a spectre. It helped them understand the why, but it brought them no closer to discovering the who. In 1989, police arrested a vagrant in Calcutta, hoping he was the elusive Stoneman. The case against him was built on suspicion, not evidence. No witnesses, no forensics, only a disputed confession. Released for lack of proof, his arrest brought hope, then disappointment. The murders stopped, but the mystery endures. Following the final murder in Calcutta in late 1989, the Stoneman simply disappeared from the public consciousness. Just as he had vanished from Bombay 2 years earlier, he now vanished from Calcutta, and this time, it really seemed to be for good. The nights grew quiet, the body count stopped rising, and the intense media spotlight began to fade away. With no new crimes and no new leads, the massive police task forces that had been assembled were gradually dismantled. The case, which had once been the most urgent priority for two of India's largest police departments, slowly began its inevitable journey into the archives, transitioning from an active investigation into a cold case. The files remained open, but, they just gathered dust. Decades passed, and with them, the chances of ever solving the mystery dwindled to almost nothing. Key investigators retired, taking their institutional knowledge with them. Any potential witnesses would have aged, their memories faded or gone entirely. The physical evidence, which was scant to begin with, would have degraded over time. The Stoneman case became a legend, a chilling story told by journalists and true crime enthusiasts. But for law enforcement, It represented a permanent and frustrating failure. The killer had won, achieving the criminal's ultimate goal. He got away with it. In the years that followed, there were no deathbed confessions, no startling new discoveries, and no forensic breakthroughs like DNA that could be applied retroactively to the scant evidence. The case remained frozen in time, a perfect unsolved mystery from a bygone era of policing. The lack of resolution has allowed countless theories to flourish, but without any way to prove or disprove them, they remain pure speculation. The Stoneman's identity is a blank slate onto which any number of fears and theories can be projected, but it is a slate that will likely never be filled with a definitive answer. Today, the Stoneman Murders stand as one of India's most profound and haunting unsolved crimes. More than 24 victims, their lives brutally cut short, never received justice. Their killer, or killers, was never held accountable and likely lived out his days in anonymous freedom. The case serves as a dark reminder of the limits of investigation and the terrifying reality that some monsters are never caught. The trail did not just run cold, it was never warm to begin with. It was a path of dead ends from the very first stone that was cast. The most persistent and haunting question at the heart of the Stoneman case is whether the murders in Bombay and Calcutta were the work of one man or two separate individuals. This fundamental uncertainty has divided investigators, criminologists, and armchair detectives for decades, creating two dominant and equally terrifying schools of thought. The evidence can be interpreted to support either conclusion, leaving the truth shrouded in a thick fog of speculation. On one hand, the sheer precision of the replicated signature across two cities, separated by over 1,000 miles, points strongly towards a single, highly disciplined killer. The method was not just similar, it was identical in its brutal specifics. This theory posits a single mobile predator who, for reasons unknown, decided to relocate his hunting ground. The timeline is almost too perfect to be a coincidence. The killings in Bombay ceased in 1987, followed by a 2-year period of silence. Then, in 1989, they began again in Calcutta, as if a switch had been flipped. This neat chronological fit suggests a killer who deliberately moved from one metropolis to another, perhaps to evade the increasing police pressure in Bombay, or simply seeking a fresh start in a new city. This paints a picture of a cunning, patient, and methodical individual, one of India's most elusive and successful serial killers, who outsmarted two major police forces. On the other hand, the theory of two separate killers is just as plausible, and in some ways, even more disturbing. This hypothesis suggests that an individual in Calcutta, perhaps already harboring violent tendencies, was inspired by the extensive media coverage of the Bombay Stoneman. The press had sensationalized the original murders, providing a detailed, almost instructional account of the killer's modus operandi. It is conceivable that a second individual, a copycat killer, adopted this pre-made blueprint for murder. This would explain the identical method without requiring the logistical complexities of a single killer traveling across the country undetected and restarting his spree. This copycat theory raises chilling questions about the nature of violence and the influence of the media. If true, it means the Stoneman was not just a person, but an idea, a terrifying concept that could be transmitted and replicated. It suggests a form of social contagion where the notoriety of one killer's actions inspired another to commit similar atrocities. This possibility is deeply unsettling because it implies that the horror was not contained within a single twisted mind, but could be sparked in another. The debate rages on, with no definitive proof for either side, leaving the core of the mystery, one killer or two, unresolved. The theory that a single man committed both sets of murders is compelling. The ritual, solitary victims, heavy stones, precise attacks, was repeated in two cities, years apart. The Stoneman could have traveled unnoticed, blending into crowds, vanishing like a ghost on the rails, haunting the nation's underbelly. The copycat theory suggests two killers, one in Bombay another in Calcutta, inspired by sensational headlines. Media coverage gave a blueprint for violence, turning the Stoneman into a legend. The idea spread, terrorizing two cities, not by one man, but by a contagion of violence. The Stoneman case inspired not just theories of lone or dual killers, but wild rumors of cults, rituals, and even state conspiracies. Some believed the murders were part of a dark rite. Others saw a government plot to target the homeless. With no answers, the public filled the void with fear and speculation, turning the Stoneman into a symbol of society's deepest anxieties. After the final murder in Calcutta in late 1989, the Stoneman vanished like a phantom at sunrise. The killings stopped, but the silence that followed was chilling. The case faded into cold archives, the killer's identity never revealed. The victims became nameless, their stories lost. The Stoneman's legacy is not justice, but a haunting silence and unanswered questions. The Stoneman's unsolved crimes faded from police files, but his legend thrived in pop culture, books, TV, and especially Indian cinema. Films like The Stoneman Murders captured the city's fear, turning the killer into a chilling icon. Through these stories, the Stoneman remains a haunting ghost in India's collective memory. The Stoneman Murders exposed a chilling truth. In the shadows of India's cities, the most vulnerable are often invisible. The killer thrived on society's indifference, and decades later, the homeless remain exposed and forgotten. The real lesson? Justice is measured by how we protect those on the margins. The stones are silent, but their questions still echo. The Stoneman Murders haunt India's criminal history, a faceless killer who preyed on the forgotten, turning city streets into hunting grounds. For years, Bombay and Calcutta lived in fear as the Stoneman struck, vanishing without a trace. The case remains unsolved, a chilling reminder of lives erased and justice denied, leaving behind only shadows and unanswered questions. Decades later, the central questions remain: who was the Stoneman? Was it one man haunting two cities, or did the story inspire a deadly copycat? His identity, motive, and methods are still a mystery, his silence a chilling legacy. The case endures, a reminder that sometimes the simplest crimes are the hardest to solve. The Stoneman Murders are a chilling reminder of how society's most vulnerable can be forgotten. The homeless victims were targeted because they were invisible, their lives and deaths ignored. This legacy of neglect still haunts India's cities today. To honor the victims is to confront the indifference that allowed such horror to happen.